Okay, welcome back to Cusp of Coffee. My name is Uwais Adam and I am a fourth year dental student.
And I am Dr. Klerk, a community service dentist. And this week we are finally doing an episode that I have been wanting to do for a very long time. We are doing the money episode. The reason, we all got into dentistry.
Of course, 100%.
Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of a look at the financial side of dentistry, specifically in the context of young dentists. So this is mainly aimed at like final year dental students and first year dentists to help them sort of make better financial decisions if they have no idea where to even begin. But before we get into it, massive disclaimer. Obviously, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm also not sponsored by any of the companies that I might mention during this episode. It's just a collection of stuff that I picked up over the past 4 years of trying to educate myself on investing and personal finance. And it sort of includes a lot of information that I wish someone had told me earlier because it would have saved me a lot of time. So that being said, this is going to be a lot of information. Don't worry if you don't get all of it. It took me years to really wrap my head around it. So feel free to save this episode, come back to it as needed. I basically just want this episode to be kind of a resource, the resource that I wish I had going into sort of life as a dentist. So there are a few main questions that we're going to cover today, and they include: how much do dentists earn in 2024? What does a good budget look like? What is some basic advice when it comes to saving and investing? Do I need insurance? If so, what kind? And then finally, how to kind of buy happiness. Because no matter how much money you make, it's not that difficult to put yourself in a position where money controls you and you are still fundamentally unhappy. So, okay, first up, the big one. Dentist salaries. So there are a lot of things that are going to influence this, but first off, we're just going to start with community service, which for, most dental students is the first time they'll really be earning any kind of salary. So in community service, depending on where you are going to earn between 45 and 53,000 after tax.
Damn.
So the thing that will change what your income is at the end of the month will depend on where you are physically located. So if you are in a rural area, then the government will give you what's known as rural allowance on top of the base salary that you already get. And so that's kind of how you get to that 53,000 number. Now, obviously, the disadvantage of that is you're living in the middle of
nowhere.
The middle of nowhere. Yeah. So to do anything, to go see people, to sort of live your life as you want, everything becomes a lot more expensive because for all you know, the nearest town might be an hour away. So that's why you get that rural allowance. But obviously, if your main goal is just to save as much as you can during ComServe, going for rural posts, not a bad idea, because when you're in the middle of nowhere, you can't be tempted to buy stuff from Woolworths because there's
no Woolworths.
So you end up just saving a lot of money that way. On top of that, these are, kind of the numbers for 2024, but the baseline salary increases every 2 or so years to keep up with inflation. And it actually happened now again at the end of the financial year. So I'm actually now being paid more than I was in January, which is quite nice.
But basically, it's between that range, like right now at least.
Yes, that's pretty much the range, yeah. Then after ComServe, that salary drops off dramatically if you decide to go into private, because then you essentially have to start working for commission. And so at the start, there will be sort of a direct correlation between how fast you work and how much money you get to take home at the end of the month. So that coming off of ComServe, after asking around a whole lot, people a little bit older than me, people that just now came out of ComServe, when you start, you probably won't be very skilled with a lot of procedures because you've mostly just been doing extractions for 12 months in ComServe. So during those first few months, people's salaries can drop all the way down to 15,000. Which is obviously a massive difference from what you were earning in CompServe. But after the first 6 months, most people seem to work themselves back to a salary of between 35 and 50,000. So that's kind of the going rate, but that will also depend a lot on where you work. So in metropolitan areas, you will most likely earn less when you're starting out because there's so much competition. But as you gain experience, there does seem to be a sort of higher earning potential in metropolitan areas compared to smaller cities and towns. In contrast, if you start working in a smaller town, then you might not have that much of a drop-off in your salary after CompServe, but your lifetime earnings will definitely be capped, since people in small towns aren't really getting ready to put down like 200,000 for a smile makeover, whereas in Sandton,
yeah, that's run-of-the-mill dentistry.
So those are things to take into consideration. So to give some actual examples, of my younger friends that are working in smaller towns that just came out of CompServe, their salaries after CompServe seem to be between 35 to 40,000, and this is now around about 3 to 4 months after CompServe. But then with my older friends that are working in metropolitan areas like Pretoria and Cape Town, after a few years of working, they've now worked up to monthly salaries of between 60 to 70,000, and that is still just working off of commission. To really go beyond this, you usually have to either just brand yourself really well, become a specialist, or open up your own practice, all of which are discussions for a different day, because this is mainly just focused on like young dentists. But that's kind of, the ballpark you can think of when it comes to numbers and, kind of planning your financial life for the next few years.
What I'm getting from this is, what you're saying is the commission thing, for people who don't know what commission is. So my understanding, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of what commission is you are now qualified and you're working for somebody else in the practice that they own, and essentially from all of the patients that you see, whatever the patients pay, you get a specific percentage of that gets agreed upon with the lead dentist there that you're working for. That's commission, essentially.
Yes. So essentially if you bill, let's say you bill 1,000 Rand, that's your bill for the patient. Industry standard, you will get 35%. So you'll get 350 Rand for every 1,000 Rand that you bill, and the rest goes to the practice. There's a bit of a range between 30 to 40%, with 40 being like sort of the best you can get. Most people get 35, and if they really hate you, you usually get around 30. So that's sort of what you can expect. Okay, so then after you have your money, the question then sort of becomes, okay, what do I now do with this? Like, what does a good budget look like? Or essentially, how do I spend my money without being too stupid about it? So there's a lot of nuance to this, and it'll vary from person to person depending on whether you have studied that or you have family members that you need to take care of. But there's a sort of golden standard that most financial advisors agree on that you can use as a starting point, and then you can just adjust it to fit your lifestyle accordingly. So if you have a piece of paper or you have your phone nearby, I'd say write this down. And basically, you can divide your money into 3 main buckets. So first is fixed costs. So this is rent, utilities, debt, insurance, basically anything that you have to pay every single month. That is your fixed costs. And it's good to allocate between 50 to 60% of your income towards your fixed costs. Second, for investments and savings, try to allocate at least between 10 to 20% of your income towards that. And you can adjust this number based on what it is you are saving up for. And this is not just stuff like retirement. This also includes saving up for your wedding, saving up for your vacations, saving up in general so that you can have an emergency fund when you get out of CompServe and you're making no money, but you still have expenses to pay. So it's sort of a catch-all bucket of just savings and investments. 10 to 20% seems to be kind of the minimum going rate on that. And then finally, the third bucket is what's referred to as guilt-free spending money. And this can be as high as 20 to 35% of your income. Essentially, this is money you spend on stuff that matters to you. So, stupid example, if you're into video games, you can use some of this money to upgrade your gaming setup. If you're into painting, you can use this to buy art supplies. If you're into luxury, you can use this to treat yourself to spa days. This part of your budget essentially goes towards rewarding yourself for the hard work that you do. It is meant to be enjoyed. But as I said, this is just a starting point to work off from. You can adjust this as you see fit. In my case, I'm very savings focused this year. So only about 10% of my income goes towards guilt-free spending, and between 40 to 50% of my income goes towards savings and investments, which is a nice segue into the next topic, which is savings and investing 101. But just before we get into that, as you can see, you can, kind of shift that around as you see fit based on your lifestyle, based on the goals that you are trying to get to.
Yeah.
But this is just to give you a bit of an idea of where to start before you start earning money. And then once you start earning money and you kind of get an idea of what your expenses are and that kind of stuff, then you can, adjust it a bit more to fit your specific life.
Yeah. So it's about sitting down essentially when you start making this money and like kind of just mapping out what your goals are, especially for the year and for your future, and just kind of figure out what are those numbers. Where do you fit into those numbers? Like you said, for you adjusted it. So it's not like you have to stick to those. You just, play around. Yeah.
Okay. Then saving and investing. Okay. So this is one of those topics that can get like infinitely complex for no real good reason. And for some reason, everyone has an opinion on it. But the key idea when it comes to saving and investing is basically this. Every year, money becomes less valuable due to inflation. So the current inflation rate in South Africa is about 5 to 6%, which is more than the average interest rate on a normal bank account, which is sometimes zero. So by leaving your money in your bank account, it loses value over time. It doesn't just stay where it is.
Yeah.
So ideally, you want to keep your money somewhere where your money is increasing in value at around 5 to 6% every year to keep up with inflation. But ideally, you want it to increase at an even higher rate than that so that you're actually making money and your wealth is growing outside of you, working during the day. Now, to do this, there's like 10 million ways to do this, from property to gold to becoming a drug dealer. But basically, I'm just going to focus on the most reasonable options for the average young dentist who is just trying to live their life and not spending 16 hours a day looking at stock prices and wondering whether they're going to lose their life savings in Forex or Bitcoin or whatever is popular at the time. So there are 3 main options to look at if you want a stress-free financial situation. And those options are A, a high-yield savings account, B, a fixed deposit account, and C, index funds. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail with all of them. So first up, as a general rule of thumb, if you are saving up for something that you will need the finances for within the next 12 months, such as paying for a postgraduate course or saving up for some vacation at the end of the year, your best bet is to just put it in a high yield savings account. In other words, it's essentially just a normal savings account with a decently high interest rate, usually between 7 to 8%. Most banks offer this, but I know Investec in particular is quite a good option in this regard because they usually tend to cater towards young professionals. Like I said, I'm not sponsored by anyone to say that, it's just what I've observed. Next up, if you are saving up for something that you will need the finances for within the next 1 to 5 years, such as paying for a wedding or saving up for a deposit on a new car, then you might be better off looking at something like a fixed deposit account. Essentially, it is very similar to a high yield savings account, except with a savings account, you can often withdraw your money at any time or with a 24-hour notice. However, with a fixed deposit account, you usually have to give them a notice either a few weeks or a few months ahead of time whenever you want to withdraw funds from that account. And in exchange for this, you can often get much higher rates on a fixed deposit account compared to a high yield savings account. And then finally, when it comes to really long-term investing, so essentially if you're saving up for something that you will need the finances for within the next 5 to 60 years, such as buying a property or setting yourself up for retirement, then it's worth looking at what is known as index funds. So index funds have to do with investing, i.e. stocks and shares, but it's sort of a much safer way to go about it for the average person. So basically, when you think of investing, the first thing that usually comes to mind is buying a stock, i.e. a piece of a company. So if you buy one stock in Tesla and Tesla's market value goes up by 20%, then your stock will also go up by 20%. However, if Tesla goes down by 20%, your stock will also go down by 20%. And if Tesla for some reason goes bankrupt, your stock becomes worthless and you lose all that money. So generally, unless trading individual stocks is your full-time job, it's a good idea to just stay away from buying individual stocks, because it's a very high risk kind of investment. If something happens to the company, you lose all your money. It's that simple. But luckily, that's where index funds come in. So basically, an index, all it is it's just a list of the top performing companies within a specific group or area of the economy. So you might have heard of something called the S&P 500, which is a very popular index. And essentially all it is, it's just an index of the top 500 companies in the United States. Now, an index fund is basically just an investment that divides your money across an entire index. So if you invest 100 Rand in the S&P 500, it will take a little piece of that 100 Rand and invest it in every single company in that index. So in this case, all 500 of them. On top of that, it will do it according to proportion size. So for example, let's say Apple makes up 2% of the S&P 500, then 2 Rand of your 100 Rand will go to Apple. So if Apple suddenly goes bankrupt tomorrow, all that will happen is you will lose 2 Rand instead of 100 Rand. And the rest of your investments are still growing as normal, so they can make up for that loss. And usually what happens in an index fund is the loss of an individual company is not enough to bring down the entire market, because it's only one company out of 500. So the only way to really lose money in something like the S&P 500 is if the entire US economy essentially burns to the ground all at once, at which point we're probably facing some kind of world-ending situation and money becomes meaningless anyway. So to continue with the example of the S&P 500, according to Investopedia, the index has returned a historic annualized return of around 10.2% since its 1957 inception through to the end of 2023. So in a nutshell, for very long-term investment, definitely look at index funds. And if you have a financial advisor, ask them about it.
So basically these funds or these three options, what you're saying is like when you get paid, instead of just putting your money and letting it sit in your normal savings account or your normal, whatever your account is, what's the word for it? I don't know.
Checking.
Yeah. So you're just letting it sit there. You're instead putting it in one of these so that it can kind of grow for you, because you're assuming you're not going to touch the money that you're saving. So while instead of letting it just sit, it's growing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the exact, kind of account that you put it into, whether that be high yield, fixed or index, just depends on how long you're going to be saving for. So if it's less than 12 months, do high yield savings. If it's 1 to 5 years, do a fixed deposit. And if it's more than 5 years, just put it in an index fund and forget about it. So that's sort of the easiest stress-free way to go about it. A lot of other things, Bitcoin is a good example, it's what's known as a volatile investment, in that the returns you get fluctuate wildly. You might get 15% today, and tomorrow morning you're getting minus 12%. So stuff like that, it's not a good idea to put a substantial amount of your portfolio into high risk stuff like that. If you just want to do stress-free, just look at the 3 things that I mentioned, and you'll basically never have to worry too much about your investments and your savings. But especially if you're a final year student, what you might have already started finding out for yourself, and what you will definitely find out later in the year, is that a lot of insurers and financial advisors are going to come your way. So
The hounds.
especially in the case of insurers, they are going to try and insure you 5 ways to Sunday. They basically want to insure every lost soul in your body, as well as the next 3 generations of your bloodline. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But essentially, as a young dentist, just to sort of cut through the noise, you only need the following to keep yourself safe. You need what's called income protection. So this is basically just, if you can't work anymore, you will still continue to have a salary. Disability cover, which is quite important for someone that is a dentist, because you need your hands and your arms to work. So basically, if you just become disabled in some way, disability cover will pay out. And then critical illness. So critical illness is essentially anything from a heart attack to diabetes. There's a really big list of critical illnesses. Basically, if you get afflicted by any of them, you get a large payout from that as well, because it affects your ability to work. You might be taking time off from work to now, and you might have extra expenses now to, sort of work around this critical illness that you have. So that's kind of the main insurance that's good to have. And then along with that, you can either have a hospital plan or full-on medical aid if you really want to. But, chances are, if you just came out of dental school, you're probably like in your early 20s to mid 20s, your medical risks are extremely, extremely low. So it's usually good to just start off with a hospital plan, and then sort of as you get into your 30s, you can upgrade that into a full-on medical aid. But again, that's something that is kind of up to personal preference. And then also, while you are in ComServe, you do get litigation cover with the HPCSA. So if someone sues you in ComServe, the HPCSA will help you. After ComServe, that falls away. So after ComServe, you need to get litigation cover. Also, most people won't hire you unless you have litigation cover. So definitely look at something like dental protection. They are sort of at the forefront when it comes to litigation cover for dentists specifically. And then everything else from like funeral cover to life cover to helicopter emergency rescue. Honestly, as a young professional, my opinion would be that you don't need it at this point in your life. And if you do, that sounds like a very stressful situation to be in. But they are going to try and sell all this kind of stuff to you. They're going to tell you a bunch of really scary stories. Don't fall for it. A lot of it is just a way for them to get extra money out of you. Essentially, all you really need is what I mentioned, just income protection, disability cover, critical illness, and then either hospital plan or medical aid, depending on your situation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, a little section that I call How to Buy Happiness According to the Research. So this section is basically just a bit of a lightning round on a few key pieces of advice to take into consideration when it comes to money and just kind of being satisfied in life. Because the assumption that we all tend to make is that more money equals more happiness, which, hey, if you go from being a student with no money to a dentist that has some money, that holds up.
Yeah.
But it isn't necessarily true for like all of life, and could have the opposite effect if taken too far. So you never want to get to a point where your money and your possessions own you instead of the other way around. There's more to life than maxing out the numbers on your bank account. And these tips are just there to help you to kind of stay mindful of that and just kind of stay the course. So first up, if you're trying to be happy, it is more rewarding to buy experiences than it is to buy things. For example, you could today, right now, buy a brand new iPhone 15 Pro for 26,000 Rand. And you can use that to scroll on TikTok and take selfies. Or you could buy an iPhone 12 Pro for 11,000, which does pretty much the same thing for most people.
Yeah.
And then not only have a great iPhone, but have enough money left to pay for you and two of your friends to fly down to Cape Town, rent out a cool Airbnb for everyone, and have a great time. The memories of which will make you much happier and stay with you way longer than your iPhone 15 will.
Yeah.
So in general, if you're trying to be happy, it's more rewarding to buy experiences than to buy things. But when it comes to buying things, the sort of general advice is spend generously on the things that matter to you and cut costs mercilessly on the things that don't. So to use the phone example again, if you don't care that much about phones, don't buy the newest iPhone just because everyone else is. Cut costs on the stuff that don't matter to you so that you can spend more on the things that do matter to you. So for me, personally, I don't care that much about phones, but I really enjoy like a good restaurant experience and being able to pay for other people's dinners. So I don't mind spending more money at an upscale restaurant of people I enjoy spending time with, and in exchange, I walk around with an older pre-owned iPhone.
Yeah.
That's just a trade-off I'm willing to do. But when you are sort of, optimizing for other people's lives, then you'll never have enough money left over to spend on the things that you actually care about. So again, don't stress too much about spending on the things that you care about, but definitely cut costs where you don't care, because it's just not worth it. Then, sort of in a similar vein, focus on big wins instead of stressing about all the small losses. I think this is a habit that we kind of pick up as students, which is to penny pinch, essentially.
Yeah.
And as much as saving money is good, penny pinching, especially when you're already earning a good amount of money, just isn't worth the time and effort. You're usually better off trying to focus on ways to increase your income instead of worrying about whether the sushi at this restaurant is $8,000 more expensive than at that restaurant. There's a limit to how much you can cut down, but there's no real limit to how much you can earn. So don't sweat the small stuff too much. Life is about a lot more than squeezing out every last cent. And then finally, know the value of your time. And you and we've even spoken about this back when I was still studying, back when I didn't have money. And I kind of like to call this the cost of the money that you earn. Because as a dentist, the main way you earn money is by trading your time. So you show up for work. And by working longer hours and working over weekends, you can greatly increase your income. But that does also mean you always come home late and you don't really have weekends to spend with friends and family.
Yeah.
Especially as a new dentist, you won't always have that much control over your time because you're still new to the game. But also don't focus so much on work and making money that you forget to actually have a life. You can always make more money, but you cannot buy back time. And so sometimes you have to think what's more valuable, an extra hour on a Saturday or however much the amount is that you might get from seeing a patient in that time. And for me, at least, just the way I kind of look at it, I'm only going to be in my 20s once. I'm healthy, I have energy, and, I'm sort of trying to take opportunities to actually enjoy my money. Because the thing is, dental school is hard. We've had this discussion a lot of times.
Yeah, that's the theme.
So to get to the end of dental school and then just put yourself in a new grind, and it reminds me a lot of sort of the legend of Sisyphus, where he was cursed to roll a boulder up the hill for eternity, and every time he gets to the top of the hill, the boulder just rolls back down. That's not really how I want to live my life,
There needs to be some point.
I feel like by the time you finish dental school, you've sort of crossed a big mountain in your life, and it's okay to enjoy the view, even if it means maybe not making as much as the person next to you, but you have great experiences and, you're just enjoying your 20s, which by the time you get to your 50s, there's no amount of money that is too much that you'd be willing to pay to go back to when you were 20. So while you are here, remember to also enjoy it. Don't let the habits you had from being a student kind of prevent you from living your kind of young doctor life,
Yeah.
Obviously in reason, but if you've kind of taken the advice up until this point, money isn't, and stability when it comes to money isn't really something you're going to have to stress about. So it's okay. It's okay to live outside the spreadsheet a little bit.
Yeah. Look, I've taken a lot of notes myself right now, but a couple of questions I have that maybe I'm just dumb, but I'm sure a lot of other people would also have. So going back to what you talked about, the different percentages that you would invest, or not invest, but the way you would divide up your income and the different types of accounts and stuff. So let's say it's the end of the month, it's payday, the money comes in, they pay it obviously into one account. Then do you sit immediately and you just take this percentage and put it in this account and this percentage and put it in that account? And or do you just how does one practically go about that? Like how does an adult do that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's this concept in the world of finance called paying yourself first.
Yeah.
And essentially all it means is that you do your savings and investments first, and then you do everything else. So obviously on your first month of getting paid, don't do that because you don't know what your expenses are going to be.
Yeah.
But at this point, I've been employed now for a few months, and I generally keep track of my expenses and stuff. So I have a very good idea of like sort of how much I can put into savings, how much, my fixed costs are going to be, all that stuff. So now if I get paid, literally, we tend to get paid at midnight. So what I'll do, I'll go to work the next morning, and the moment I come back home, I sit and I pay out my investments first. So that's the first thing I'll do. And then from there, I'll start paying off everything else, because then I know, okay, that's sorted. A lot of it is set up to be automatic. So like my insurance and my hospital plan, that, my Wi-Fi, that kind of stuff just goes off automatically on the second of every month.
Yeah.
So I know, okay, that's not really something I have to worry about. The major expenses are going to sort themselves out. So usually by the third of the month, my bank account is like... is not what it was like 2 days prior.
Yeah.
So there's usually very little money left in my account at that point, because I choose to just pay all my big stuff all at once. And then I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I only have X amount for the rest of the month. So then I just kind of work off of that. But obviously, like I said, I have a good idea of what my expenses are going to be. So I know, okay, I'm going to need this much for petrol this month. I'm going to need this much for food this month. I have enough. It's not an issue. And then when I get to the end of the month and there's any money left over, I will usually just put whatever that amount is back into my savings. And then I get paid, and then the cycle just continues from there. So practically, that's how I go about it. What's nice about, living in 2024, you can automate pretty much everything. So now I get paid and I don't really have to think about it. The only thing I have to do myself still is just pay towards my investments. And that's it. Like the rest, it takes care of itself, and I can go through my weeks, buying stuff and spending, buying petrol, that kind of stuff. And I don't have to worry about it, because I know I've left enough for myself. And so far, every single month, I've come in under budget, even on the months where I thought I would go over budget. So, and then that just adds to the savings as well. So as long as, you have a rough idea, ballpark idea of what the numbers are going to be, it's pretty hard to go over budget. You just need to sit down once, just make a little Excel spreadsheet, just put in some numbers, and you'll start figuring out how it all comes together. But generally, it's not a difficult thing. It's maybe the first month or two, it's something you have to think about. And then after that, you can just automize all of it.
So like things like your fixed, so obviously the savings and stuff would go into one of those three options, right? So maybe you'd even have more than one option. So maybe you have a high yield savings plus you have a fixed deposit, then you dedicate those yourself. But your fixed costs, the money that you're dedicating towards that and the money that you're dedicating towards guilt-free spending money, do you just leave that in your account that your employer pays you into. You just leave it in there because you're going to use that and it's going to go off automatically for Wi-Fi, bills, petrol, food, all that stuff.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Because of the way I set it up, that it goes off pretty much immediately the day after I get paid. It's not like it's sitting in the account, because the bulk of it just leaves. On the first day, the investment money goes out. The day after that, all my major expenses goes out, and then pretty much all I'm left with is like my variable kind of expenses, so like petrol and food and stuff, and then the amount I leave for myself for like guilt-free spending money. So then I just kind of work off of that, and what's nice is it kind of like that's what I see. You know, when I open up my bank account app, that's the money I see. So it's not like it's real. You know, if you open up your bank account and you have 90,000 Rand chilling there, it's very hard to say no to buying the new iPhone.
Yeah.
But when you open up your account and there's only like 12,000 there, it's like, wow, I literally cannot afford this.
Yeah.
Let's just stick to the budget.
It shows you the money that's actually yours, not the money that you owe to things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the savings also like goes off automatically, like you've set a percentage already or an amount, and that amount will just automatically go towards your savings accounts.
Yeah. So for me, you can just make that automatic. For me, I haven't made it automatic just because of the nature I'm doing sort of my savings and investments this year, where part of my savings and investments is investing into myself. So I'm doing a master's degree and I'm doing board exams. And so, for example, the other month I had to pay for my master's. So instead of like paying the normal amount I would into my savings account, I took about 10,000 from that just to pay off half of my master's so long, you know? So in my head, savings and investments is a little bit more flexible, just because I'm sort of investing in myself as well. But if I wasn't doing that, I would totally just set up a debit order.
Automate it.
And the moment I get paid, it just pays out immediately. I don't even have to think about it.
Okay, because that basically answers my next question, which was obviously the fact that when you graduate, even during ComServe, a lot of people want to start doing, courses and things to build up their skill set. Like you said, investing in yourself. And so you kind of answered that question, because I was going to ask, where does that money come from? Does it come from your guilt-free spending money? Does it come from your fixed costs? But you basically answered it is that you just manually do your savings. So you take it from your savings because it's extra income and you kind of are investing it still, but you're just investing it into yourself.
Yes.
Okay, and that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah, I think the big thing is not to like overcomplicate it. I know even with like a lot of people will use like expense tracking apps and stuff. And then every time you log an expense, there's like 21 categories to pick from of like, this is in the lifestyle category and this is that. So I think just simplify it as much as you can. And honestly, the easiest way to go about it is what I mentioned. Just it's like 3 different areas. And the nuance of that, you can decide how detailed you want to get into that. For example, with savings, you can be like, this percentage goes into high yield. This percentage goes into fixed deposit. But as long as you're just kind of hitting that general like 10 to 20% of your income every month, you'll be good. You don't need to sweat the small stuff that much as long as you have the big stuff in place.
Yeah, especially going from being a student where you have no money and whatever money you do have doesn't get invested or saved. It's just in one account. There's one place. It's like a piggy bank. That's it. And now if you go into making money and you break it down, even as simply as this, it's already, it's like leaps and bounds compared to what you were doing before, because you have like so many different categories here. You have fixed costs, you have investments, all the different types of investments. And it sounds like a lot for somebody who hasn't done it before. But like you said, it can get a lot more complicated and you might be tempted to make it more complicated. But just sticking to this is more than enough, because what you were doing before was not even close to this.
Yeah. And also like the nice thing about finances is people have been doing this for many, many years. So even you can literally just Google like personal budget spreadsheet, and there'll be like 10,000 templates to pick from. All of them basically centered around the ideas that I spoke about earlier. So you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel when it comes to finances. Just find something that's close enough to how you feel you want to spend your money, and then you can just adjust it according to reality as you start earning and as you start spending.
Yeah. Well, look, I know I learned a lot here. I've made a few notes. I think it's important to start thinking about this not only when you're just like right on the edge and you're about to start making money, because kind of getting used to these ideas and understanding these percentages and, for some people, whether we like, for example, on a more personal note, like for me to differentiate between whether or not I'm going to use interest or not and what types of accounts there are for me, like using all of this as a baseline and just kind of getting an idea of what would work for you personally. I mean, like you said, some of these things don't really apply much to other people because maybe they have a lot of student debt to pay off, or they have family members they need to support. Maybe they become the sole breadwinner in the house. Like, all of our situations are different, but this kind of layout that we've basically given you guys in this episode is just a nice structure to start on and to start thinking about, because the more you start understanding these categories, the easier it'll be when that money comes in, you at least have some sort of idea of how to orientate yourself. And so that you're not like, because I mean, we've spoken about this before, but like you get certain people that they get that influx of money and they're like, wow, I now have 50K just for me. But it's not like that. Like you have to become an adult.
100% guilt-free spending money.
100%. Yeah. Like, what is fixed costs? No. Like, I will live on the street or I will sleep in my new Porsche. Like, it's fine. Like, people like it, just think about things and make smart decisions. That is the message of this episode. And just be curious about things. Just like we are supposed to be about dentistry, where we're trying to learn things, trying to, increase our knowledge, get better. Same applies here. You're going to be making money from doing the thing that you wanted to be doing. So don't mess it up.
Yeah. And the thing is, like a lot of money talk, it can get very like emotional. People sometimes have very emotional responses to money, but honestly, it's your money. You provide a service, you get paid for it. Like, it really is that simple. And it's okay to just kind of treat it for what it is, which is that it's just a number, and that number allows you to do all kinds of things. So just, it doesn't have to be this black box, this ambiguous thing of like, oh, money, it's just, oh, okay, I got paid X amount. I'm going to spend X amount on this, X amount on that. And in a few weeks, they pay me again. You can kind of do it that way. But also, like, a lot of financial advice is sort of centered around just not ever spending your money ever, which that's just not reality. We don't live like economists. We live like people. And so I like the idea of, just having a portion of your budget that is a reward to yourself. Because flipping, man, it's so hard getting this degree, and then some days are just very long. It's nice to take some of that and just spend it on something and not have to worry about it, because you've already done the worrying, when you started the year. So it's just about just kind of managing yourself in that way, managing your own sort of thoughts about money, and maybe reappraising some of the opinions you have about money, and really just kind of making it your own, because it is your own. It's your money, and no one's going to take control of it if you don't. If you leave it up to someone else, they will gladly take all of it. So you have to have an idea of what is happening.
Yeah. I mean, look, I feel like that's a great place to end it, but I think the last thought that just buzzed off of my brain right now is the thing that you said about the bolder story. Like you grind so hard in dental school, you're not getting paid for basically working a full-time job. I mean, the clinic hours we have is insane. The amount of like emotional and physical taxing that it does to you, like, and then you have to pay for that because you're paying for the degree. So it's such a grind, and to get to the end and then dive into this whole financial game, which that's one of the reasons I've always been myself very hesitant to look into it, because from the outside in, like you said, it always seems like it's centered around never spending your money. But then you also don't want to be overspending your money and being ridiculous with what you're doing. But at the end of the day, after grinding for so long, I also like the fact that this is a very realistic way to go about things. It's like the middle path. You're not overspending and you're not severely underspending. You're having this category of guilt-free spending money, which you deserve because you grinded so long. Don't just get into your degree, into your job, into the workplace, start saving and think, okay, it's time to just never treat myself and never buy anything nice. And then you're back where you were, working for free, but you're just making money that's not yours. So it's nice that there's a small category. Even if it's small, it's there for you to enjoy, because, I mean, we all deserve it at the end of the day.
And of that, it brings us to the end of the money episode. It only took, 6 years of studying to get to a point where I could have money. Yeah. Easy clap. But like I said, this episode, treat it more so like a resource. If you didn't get all the info, don't worry. I think it would be weird if you did get everything.
Yeah.
So
you can always rewind.
If you get to the end of final year, get to the start of CompServe, you just want a bit of a refresher, you can always just listen to it again. This will always be online. So thank you for joining me in my money talks. And then, I think next time we'll probably be back to the actual, the nitty gritty of dentistry.
Yeah, whether it's been CompServe or still in the slumber of dental school, unfortunately, poor me, but that's how it goes. One day I will also be making money like Dr. Klerk over here, but that is just a dream.
All right.
But thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Cheers.